Of the Romano Report. Doing this as a live stream once again. I thank you all for joining me. I want to talk about Trump stealing elections and rigging upcoming elections. I really hope that people are appropriately alarmed. I'm getting the sense that not enough people are yet. At least not enough people in the media. Of course, I don't know if they're ever going to become sufficiently alarmed. And maybe they are, and they're just not saying that they are because they're afraid to. Don't even know. Oh, I see. Anyway, I don't know if any of them or enough of them have the guts to report honestly about what this guy is doing. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why Don Lemon was arrested on those bogus charges. This is about sending a message to media to say, hey, I'll arrest you. I don't give a shit. If you report negatively, if you say things I don't want you to say, we'll just make up shit. We'll just arrest you. And make no mistake, those charges against Don Lemon are so obviously bogus. I mean, they couldn't even get probable cause for a warrant from a judge. So they went and got an indictment, which is far easier because you just need to convince regular people off the street. That's who essentially is in a grand jury. And you control the process completely. So it's not surprising at all that they were able to get indictment against Don Lemon. But that's one of the reasons. It's to scare people into silence so that they don't report accurately about what's going on. And how the hell are the American people going to know what the hell is going on? That this piece of shit is literally trying to rig future elections. Now, we don't know exactly what he's up to. And of course, they'll never tell us what they're up to. So we are left to speculate. Now, normally, I don't like to speculate, because I don't like I don't like saying things that I don't know are true or not. But I feel in this case, we have no other choice but to speculate and try to figure out what this criminal is doing. Now, we don't have to speculate when it comes to his intentions. We know enough about this guy to know what his intentions are. He's already tried to overthrow the republic once, to steal a presidential election once, and he committed multiple crimes in doing it. So we know that he's not above committing crimes to try to steal elections. So there's no need to speculate as to his intent or his motives. But what exactly is their plan? That we don't know. And my guess is they have plan after plan after plan. They have backups on their backups to try to steal elections. And while I don't like speculating, I think it's necessary because, look, and I'm just a fucking guy on YouTube, so it doesn't really matter too much of whether I speculate. But I sure as hell hope that people in the states who have responsibility for administering elections, I sure as hell hope that Democrats in Congress are speculating. And I think they're a little slow to all of this, too. I was just watching Senator Mark Warner from Virginia. He's a Democratic senator from Virginia. And he was on talking about this raid in Georgia. And he said, a year ago, when Trump took office, people talked about him stealing elections, and he thought that was all overblown. Now he's not. Now he's alarmed. I'm glad to see he's alarmed now. That's a good thing. And I hope other Democratic members of the House and the Senate are equally alarmed. But how the hell could you not be worried about this a year ago? He had already tried this before. I'm telling you, he committed more crimes than he was even indicted for by Jack Smith. He threatened elections officials. He threatened Brad Raffensperger. We heard it on the phone. The Secretary of State of Georgia, he threatened him with criminal prosecution if he didn't find 11,780 votes to help him win. We know that he organized a fraudulent electors scheme where he had MAGA nuts in the states pretend to be the duly elected electors from their states, and they created fictitious documents that they sent to Congress. Fictitious certificates saying that they were the truly elected, the duly elected electors from their state. They did this at Trump's behest. This was organized across many states. And there were many other crimes, not the least of which is inciting a violent insurrection. When everything else failed, he literally incited, he organized, not just incited, he called them there. Come to Washington January 6th. It will be wild. Remember that tweet. They show up. Once there, he lies to them. He riles them up. He tells them, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And then he directed them to the Capitol, where Congress was assembled to certify the election that he lost. And he sent them there specifically to stop the counting of the electoral votes. I don't know where the fuck he thought that was going. What, they were never going to count the electoral votes? Oh, I guess we know he expected Mike Pence to throw out electoral votes. Their plan was to have Mike Pence throw out electoral votes. Then nobody gets a majority. Then, per the Constitution, the election is decided by the House of Representatives. That's what he was hoping to happen. It was never going to happen. You know, and I'm sick of hearing Mike. I don't want to get too far afield on this, but you know how my mind goes. One thing after another here. I'm going to get to this stealing the election now thing, but let's just recap a little bit. I'm sick and tired of hearing Mike Pence praised for having the courage to do the right thing. We would have lost our republic if it wasn't for Mike Pence. Bullshit! It was never going to work. Even if Mike Pence did what he wanted him to, it was never going to work. Because the vice president doesn't have authority to throw out electoral votes. So what if he tried? What if he opened up the electoral votes? First of all, before we get to that, what is the vice president's role in the certification process? Because I still, unfucking believably, I still have people say today, oh, J.D. Vance could just throw out electoral votes. No, he can't. Anyway, what does the Constitution say? It says that the vice president, well, he doesn't even call him the vice president in this section. The Constitution refers to him in this section, in terms of the counting of electoral votes, refers to him as the president of the Senate, because that's the role he's in during that process. He's not there as vice president, he's there as president of the Senate, which is just a ceremonial role, unless there's a tie vote and he gets to cast a tie-breaking vote. That is the only actual authority that the vice president / president of the Senate has. That's it. Casting tie-breaking votes. That's it. Now, what does it say the president of the Senate's authority is in the certification process? Opening the certificates. That's it. So the states meet and they cast their electoral votes. Then they compile certificates with their electoral votes and they send it to Congress. On January 6th, Congress receives them and counts the votes. It's the vice president or the president of the Senate's role to open the certificates. That's literally it. It doesn't even say that the president of the Senate / vice president gets to count the votes, just that he gets to open the certificates. It's purely ceremonial. It sets out a ceremony for counting the votes. That's it. It's not supposed to be a situation where Congress decides who the president is. It's ceremonial. The states get to decide who the president is through the Electoral College system. So what if, completely unconstitutionally, Mike Pence attempted to throw out electoral votes? He opens the certificates and he says, I think there was fraud in this state's election. I'm throwing them out. What would happen then? Would the Senate just go, ugh, that sucks. I guess Joe Biden's not going to win now. Mike Pence just threw out the... Think how fucking... Mike Pence was a candidate. So stupid. He was on the fucking ballot. He was a candidate. You're telling me that the framers of the Constitution were so fucking stupid that they created a system in which they would allow potentially a candidate to throw out the elections, to throw out the votes of an election he lost. Unfriggin' believable. So what if he did it? The Senate would just go, oh, well, I guess there's nothing we could do. No! The Senate there would have been senators who stand up and say, I object, he doesn't have authority to do this. And then they'd go to the parliamentarian for an order, seeking a ruling on whether the vice president has authority to do that. And the parliamentarian would say, no, of course he can't do that. And that would be it. At most, they would take a vote shooting that down. And it was never going to work. Ever fucking ever going to work. And even if, say there were enough votes to say, yeah, he can do that. Would Joe Biden, who won the election and is now seeing it stolen right in front of him, is he just going to go, okay, that really sucks. Mike Pence just threw out my victory and handed it to himself and Trump. No, they'd go to court. And I don't give a shit how corrupt the Supreme Court is. There is no way they would allow that. And keep in mind, that Supreme Court had already ruled against Trump in his phony elections cases. He had election cases that went up to the Supreme Court and they ruled almost unanimously against him. They sure as fuck were not going to allow the vice president to throw out electoral votes. So it was never going to work. Anyway, so we see him do that, and he incites a violent insurrection to stop the counting of the votes. People got killed. People got beaten. Police officers got beaten almost to death. And you're telling me a United States senator who was in the fucking building at the time when this happened a year ago said, nah, I don't think he'll try to steal the election. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm glad to see Senator Warner is now alarmed. And I hope the others are alarmed. But god dang. What do you think? He's reformed? He wouldn't try something like this again? My God. Anyway, I'm concerned that there's not sufficient alarm. Because he's right out in the open with it now. He is trying to steal future elections. Now, the question is, which election is he really going to try to steal? The midterms or the 2028 presidential election? Because they're different. And there's different stakes for him. But he is putting in place the pieces for him to attempt to steal the election. In what way, I don't know. As I said, I think he'll probably do a lot of things. But right now, he's setting the framework for justifying whatever the hell it is that he's going to do. And that's what this raid in Fulton County was about. Now, let's talk about the difference between those two elections. Now, why would he want to rig the election? Why would it be so important to him? He's never going to be on the ballot again. He's just not. So why would he care all that much? He cares about the presidential election in 2028 more than anything else, I believe, because he knows, or he should know, that once he is not protected by the office, when he's no longer president, he can be prosecuted again. He can be indicted. He can be prosecuted for as many crimes. Even with this horrendous immunity decision from the Supreme Court, number one, it doesn't give him blanket immunity. It only gives him full immunity for core constitutional functions. Everything else, and that would be the vast majority of things, he only has immunity for official acts, and he has no immunity whatsoever for unofficial acts. And he has committed a lot of crimes, seemingly. Sure as hell seems that way. That can in no way be considered official acts. They're personal acts. For example, bribery and extortion. Those are not official acts of the president. And it doesn't matter that he was bribing and extorting people, soliciting bribes and extorting people through the power of the presidency. That doesn't make it an official act. We know it's not an official act because the Constitution itself says it's not an official act. Bribery is one of the specifically enumerated crimes for which a president can be removed from office. So can in no way be said to be an official act. So, and God only knows how many bribery schemes and extortion schemes he's been involved in since taking office. And there are lots of other things too. And even things that are official acts, he can still be prosecuted for. He only has presumptive immunity for official acts. Which means, and the Supreme Court said in their opinion, as horrible as it was, that he can still be prosecuted if you can overcome the presumption of immunity. And you'd have to make a showing that prosecuting a president for this particular crime, even though an official act, will not inhibit future presidents from carrying out their duties. That's essentially it. As long as you're prosecuting this guy for these crimes, it is not going to hamstring future presidents. That's it. That's how you overcome presumptive immunity. That's what the Supreme Court said. Thank you. Appreciate that. So he can still be prosecuted, and he's committed a lot of crimes. So it's imperative for him in 2028 that a Republican wins. Because if a Republican wins, then he's safe. He's not going to be prosecuted. And by the end of that term, if that Republican is succeeded by a Democrat, the statute of limitations for Trump's crimes will mostly have run. And by then, no one's going to give a shit. And he's going to be, let's face it, he's not going to be around by then anyway. So he's just most concerned about when he leaves office in 2029. So that's why for him, rigging the 2028 presidential election is most important, because it keeps his ass out of prison. But what about 2026? Because that's not nearly as important to him. Doesn't matter who wins in 2026. He's still going to be president, right? Well, you might be thinking, as most presidents do, hey, I don't want to lose control of Congress because then my legislative agenda is dead. I'm not going to get anything passed through Congress. Since when the hell does Trump care about getting anything passed through Congress? He does it. He controls Congress now. His party controls both houses of Congress. What the hell does he ever go to Congress for? Virtually nothing. He doesn't need them for anything. Not even things that the Constitution absolutely requires that he go to Congress for. Like like raising money. He can't raise money on his own. Only Congress has the power to tax and to tariff. Trump said, screw that. I can raise money without Congress. I can slap tariffs on without Congress. We'll wait to see what the Supreme Court says about that. I'm expecting them to side with him. They're going to make up some bullshit justification of how in this one particular circumstance it's okay. They're not going to go so far as to say, oh yeah, presidents can impose tariffs unilaterally. Though no, they're going to bend over backward to say why this president can. And they're going to twist the facts into a pretzel to try to make it fit a statute and say, oh yeah, this statute passed by Congress actually authorizes Trump to do this, so we're gonna say it's okay. That's what I expect they're gonna do. But he doesn't go to Congress for raising money. Fuck, he's even stealing oil from Venezuela, selling it, then taking the cash from that and putting it in a bank in Qatar that only he has access to. That money, that oil was seized by the United States. It was sold by the United States. That should go to the United States, either directly to the Treasury or to some sort of an account specifically to deal with this, but it should be controlled by the United States government via a law passed by Congress. And no money should be spent from that unless appropriated by Congress. Trump doesn't give a shit. He's got it parked in a friggin' Qatari bank. He should be impeached for that alone. God, how many things has he done that should result in his impeachment? Most of these don't even register. Most people don't even know anything about it. I try to stay up on this as much as I can. There's probably a million fucking things that he's done that are impeachable that I don't even know about. You can't keep track of all this shit. And so many of these things are crimes as well as impeachable offenses. This is why I'm saying that 2028 election, really important for him. Otherwise, he's looking at the possibility of prison when he leaves. So, he doesn't need Congress to raise money. He doesn't need Congress to spend money. He spends money that is not authorized by Congress. Does that all the time. He even refuses to spend money that has been authorized by Congress. That's also illegal. That's against federal impoundment statutes. That was one of the proposed articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon, that he impounded funds. Trump does it on a daily basis, and he threatens it right out in the open. How many times does he say, if the states don't do this, I'm not going to give them any money. I'm not going to give them this money that was appropriated by Congress. If this college doesn't do what I want them to, they're not going to get this grant money that has been appropriated by Congress. And on and on. This country, if it doesn't do what I want to, isn't going to get the foreign aid that's been appropriated by Congress. Does it all the time. So what the hell does he need Congress for? And besides raising money, spending money, and pounding funds, he also does all kinds of other things that he legally would need to go through Congress. He just issues executive orders and tells his executive branch to carry out these orders. So what the hell does he need Congress for? Why would he go to all this effort to rig the midterms? I understand the 2028 presidential election, as I said. That's to keep his ass out of prison. But why does he give a shit about the midterms? Well, up until recently, at the beginning of his presidency, let's say that, I don't think he did care too much about the midterms. But now I think he cares about it a lot more than he did because of Epstein. Right now, his cover-up has been largely successful because he's got both houses of Congress to help him in the cover-up. Yes, they passed that Epstein Transparency Act bill that Trump signed into law. But now he's in open defiance of it. Right? He is flagrantly violating that law in any number of ways. He hasn't released anywhere near all the documents yet. That's a violation. They didn't redact victims' names. That's a violation. I mean, they have violated the law in any number of ways. So, and again, that's another impeachable offense. He could be impeached for that. Not executing the laws as written by Congress is an impeachable offense. That's dereliction of duty. That's an impeachable offense. The job of the president right there in Article 2 of the Constitution is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. Is Donald Trump faithfully executing the laws of the United States? No. So he should be impeached and removed from office for dereliction of duty. But they're not going to do boo because they're in his pocket. They voted in favor of the Transparency Act because Trump gave them political cover and said, oh, once the train was leaving the station and he saw that it was going to pass no matter what, he said, oh yeah, I'm for it. They should vote in favor of it. That's why they all voted. Everyone in Congress except one dude voted in favor of the release. But that's only because Trump gave them permission. And they all wanted to, because they wanted to go lie to their constituents and say, yeah, I supported releasing the Epstein files. No, you didn't, you lying sack of shit. He's not releasing the files. He's violating the law you passed that you're so proud you voted for, and you ain't doing anything about it. You're not holding hearings. You're not trying to hold Trump in contempt or... certainly not doing like impeachment hearings, which is what you should be doing. You're not voting to censure him for violating law. You're not doing anything. You're running for the hills. When you're asked about it, you just deflect. You did what you're willing to do, and you're not willing to do anymore because you don't really care. You're full of shit. So the point is, Trump didn't really think Epstein was going to be a problem. He knew that his voters wanted the Epstein files released. But he also knows that they don't really care about anything, generally speaking, anyway. So all he has to do is say, he promised to release them to get elected. He gets elected. Then he just says, there wasn't anything there. He thought that was going to be enough. It wasn't. He really did not think Epstein was going to be a problem for him. I mean, look. He had Epsteined, so he's not a problem. He had that covered up pretty well. He made promises to the cult to get elected, but all I got to do is say I released everything. That won't be a problem. But it's a problem. And it's increasingly a problem. And it ain't going away. And so we know that he is scared to death of whatever's in those files that he's trying to cover up. So it's more important now than it was a year ago that he maintain control of Congress in the midterms. Because what if he doesn't? Well, then the Democrats are going to hold hearings. Then the Democrats can call witnesses to testify under oath on national TV about Trump and his connections to Jeffrey Epstein and what he may have done to young girls. They can subpoena documents and records. They can do a lot. And Trump can't have that. So I think he cares more now about rigging the midterms than he did. Not because he cares about losing control of Congress for legislative reasons, but because he needs Congress to continue covering his ass. He doesn't care about Congress. He doesn't care about governing. He doesn't care about the Republican Party, which they should be able to see crystal clear by now. But, as stupid as these people are, they're certainly going to see it when he's gone from the office. But that's the only reason he cares. He only cares about anything to the extent it benefits him personally. That's it. And now it benefits him personally to maintain control of Congress. So I think he is more willing now to rig the 26 elections if he possibly can. Which is a problem, because if the most important thing, as I think it is, or at least should be to this idiot, is the 2028 presidential election, some of these things that he might try to do in 26, he might not be able to get a second chance at doing in 2028. So depending upon what he tries to do, it could be a risky strategy. It may work. It may work a little, may not work at all, may work. It could be fairly successful if he tries it this year, but maybe not so much in 2028. I don't know. Can't see the future. But he runs the risk. If he does pull some of this bullshit now, he might not be able to pull it. He might not be able to pull it in 2028. So that's a real risk. But who knows? It may be a risk he's willing to take. Now that leads us to Georgia. Now I don't know exactly what's going on. I'm telling you, I want to see that friggin' affidavit. We haven't seen the search warrant. I don't know why we haven't seen the search warrant. Have you guys seen the search warrant? I haven't seen it. I've looked. I don't think it's been released. But at least the officials in Georgia have a copy of the search warrant. They were served a copy of the search warrant. So why the fuck is that not public yet? But what we really need to see is the affidavit in support of the search warrant. When they go to this magistrate judge seeking a search warrant, there's going to be a lead investigator, probably an FBI guy, swearing to a statement under oath, laying out the facts that establish probable cause that a crime has been committed and that evidence of that crime is likely to be found in the places and the things that are the subject of the search warrant. That's what they had to establish. And that magistrate judge would have read that affidavit and on the basis of that affidavit issued a search warrant. We have not seen that affidavit. I don't even know what friggin' crimes they're supposedly investigating because we haven't seen the warrant either, and I haven't seen any media outlet specifically report on what specific crimes are being investigated. Now, we can all assume that it's election fraud or something like that, But I don't know for sure. I haven't seen the warrant. And we really need to see, and I know that hasn't been made public yet, is that affidavit. And we may never see it. Here's what needs to happen. If we're going to have the best chance of seeing this, we need people in Georgia, the elections officials in Georgia, to file a lawsuit challenging the search warrant. Then we could potentially get that thing unsealed, because the search warrant and the affidavit are going to be the entire subject of that lawsuit. That's what should happen. They should file a lawsuit. They should challenge the search warrant and demand their property back. Challenge the legality of that search warrant. And when they do that, the entire focus will be that affidavit, not the search warrant itself. Well, that could be if they exceeded the scope of the search warrant, and there were problems with the search warrant apparently. Originally, they come with a search warrant for the wrong building. Then these idiots had to go back and get a new search warrant or something. That's what I heard. That's what was being reported. So the search warrant itself would be the subject of litigation if they didn't stay within the bounds of the search warrant, if they seized things that were not properly seized pursuant to the search warrant, if they searched places that were not properly within the scope of the search warrant, then the search warrant becomes relevant part of the litigation. But definitely that affidavit is, because the affidavit is the legal base, is the factual basis for the magistrate judge to determine that there's probable cause to issue the search warrant. And under the law, he's not allowed to consider anything other than what is in the four corners of that document. So the FBI agent can't just come to the judge and the prosecutor, whoever, and say, hey, this is what we put in the search warrant, but here's some other shit you need to know. Not legally allowed to consider that other shit. So when this gets challenged in court, the only facts that can be considered by the court in determining whether or not there was probable cause was what's in that affidavit. We need to see that fucking affidavit. And so these Georgia officials need to challenge this. So what are they doing? I don't know exactly. I have my suspicions. I mean, I think that he definitely wants to... He definitely wants to say that they found fraud sufficient to have rigged the election in Biden's favor in 2020, so Trump can say, I really won. So obviously that. He's been itching to do that forever. But more important, they need to find fraud so that Trump can claim that there's massive fraud. If not in all of Georgia, he doesn't need all of Georgia. Most of Georgia is red. He needs it in Fulton County, Atlanta, where most of the Democratic vote is. He doesn't care about federalizing the entire state. And he said this. He doesn't care about federalizing the whole country's elections. You know, he said this the other day. Oh, Republicans, we should federalize elections. And he said, we need to take over, what did he say, 15 places? Oh, if we could just take over about 15 places. 15 places? I did a video earlier today on the Romano Report, which I was talking more specifically about this. Because this is what I speculated about yesterday. That what he's doing is trying to come up with a justification, a rhetorical justification, because there's no legal or constitutional justification, but a rhetorical justification for going in there and taking over Fulton County. And when he says, oh, we just need to take over like 15 places, he doesn't care about the whole country. He just cares about rigging the vote in certain areas that will allow them to keep control of Congress. Or if he doesn't go all in on the midterms, then to rig the election in 2028. And you don't need to federalize the entire country. You just need to take control over certain areas. So in Georgia, the most important area to take over is Fulton County. So you go, you raid, and now Trump has all the ballots. They can tamper with those ballots. They can manufacture evidence of fraud. I mean, do you trust that they're not going to do that? Of course not. So they're not going to find any fraud, so they'll manufacture it. And then claim they have fraud. And then say, this Fulton County is so corrupt that we need to go in there and take it over. Now, it would be completely illegal. Doesn't matter if he says he found fraud or not. Doesn't matter if he proved that there was fraud. There is no legal justification. It would not be legal under any circumstances for Trump to go in there and take control of Fulton County elections. Under no circumstances is it legal or constitutional. But he doesn't care about that. He just wants to come up with this rhetorical basis for doing it. Now the thing you got to do now is worry about timing. Say he does something like that. You don't want to do that now, because then there'll be court challenges, and the courts aren't going to go along with that. So they'll rule Trump's got to get the hell out of there. Now what? Now you're screwed. Now you got courts saying you can't be in there. I guess you could defy the courts and say, screw that. You know what? If this is where it's going to go, if he's just going to defy court orders and openly rig elections by force in front of the whole country, I've been telling you guys this. I say good. I say good. Let's get it out there. Let him just go full-on authoritarian. It's not going to go well for him. I mean, the country's not going to just sit around and go, oh, okay, I guess it's a military dictatorship now. I guess we don't have elections in this country anymore. It's not going to go over well. And it's not going to work for him. But if that's what he wants to do, I say have at it. But if he tries to do it beforehand, so we're going to have these court battles. Obviously, the courts are going to rule against him. No, what you want to do if you're him, and this is why I'm saying he might only get one shot at this, you do it on election day. You don't do it in advance, because then they can challenge it in court, and the whole country, the whole world can see what you're doing, and the country will be in an uproar, which would cause Democrats to come out and vote in even greater numbers. You don't want that. You want to do it the day of. Once election day is already underway, then you send your goons in there, your stormtroopers right in there to the Fulton County Elections Office, and you say, we're taking this shit over. Then you rig the election, you manipulate the vote totals, you throw ballots away, whatever you need to do to skew the vote enough in Fulton County to throw the whole state in Republican favor. Now here's the problem. You have the House and the Senate, and those are two different games there. It's harder to rig the House because you have individual districts. So you would have to rig each individual district. You can't do that just from Fulton County. But rigging the Senate, much easier. All you got to do is just rig Fulton County enough, because Senate races are popular vote statewide. So you don't have to worry about individual districts. If you could just swing the vote enough in one area, like Fulton County, you can throw the whole state in Republicans' favor. And by the way, that's the same way you can manipulate the presidential vote. Rigging the presidential election and Senate elections in that way is a lot easier than rigging House elections. And it is amazing. These Trump years have shaken me to my core in terms of how easy it is to rig elections. If you have a criminal president who has a sycophantic Congress, who's not going to, because Congress is the only one who can stop him. Really. The only real remedy is impeachment and removal. If that is not a realistic possibility, and the president knows that, and he's willing to violate the law and he doesn't give a shit, then it is shockingly easy to rig elections this way. And that's what I've been saying from the beginning. You know, I've been freaking arguing with people since the beginning of this second Trump term. Because people have been constantly saying, oh, he's going to cancel elections. No! He's not going to cancel elections. He can't. He doesn't control the elections. They're controlled by the states. If elections were run through the executive branch of the federal government, meaning the branch that Trump controls, then hell yeah, he could cancel elections. Not legal, but he could cancel them. That's not how it works. They're run through the states. What can he do? Issue an executive order? No. He literally can't cancel elections. That's never what he was going to do. So anytime people would say this, and no one ever... I'm so sick, by the way, of people who say things and can't back up their arguments. They just make statements. Declarative, definitive statements. Can't back it up at all. And if you disagree, then you're naive. I don't know how many times I got that. Now, he can't cancel elections. Oh, you're so fucking naive. You don't. You're the one making the definitive statement. You're saying that he can cancel elections. You're making the point. It's incumbent upon you to explain how he can do it. It's not me to disprove a negative. Anyway, people have no fucking idea what they're talking about. And I'm like, look, if you just say, oh, he's going to cancel elections, you throw your hands up in the air. One, you're just going to encourage people not to vote. Why vote? The other thing is, it takes your eye off what he's really going to do. He was never going to cancel elections. He can't. And authoritarians, generally speaking, don't cancel elections anyway. They like having elections that they rig, because then they can, proclaim a popular mandate. Right? Oh, everybody loves me. Everybody wants me to be president. I won with 95% of the vote. Dictators love elections as long as they can rig them. They don't cancel them outright. And Trump doesn't have the ability to cancel them because he doesn't control the mechanisms of our elections. No, he was always going to rig them, which is what I've been saying for friggin' months and months and months. Stop talking about canceling. Let's focus on what he's going to do. Rig them. And now we're seeing it. It's right out in the open. What exactly he's going to do, I don't know. But like I said, he's probably got a lot of things. And you know what? When I say him, I'm not really talking about him. Because this is not Trump coming up with this stuff. This old demented fool doesn't understand enough about how any of this works to figure out how to rig it. It's not him. It's Stephen Miller and it's Russ Vought and it's J.D. Vance and it's them. Those are the ones coming up with these schemes. It's not fucking Trump. Far too stupid to come up with any of this on his own. So when I say he, know that I understand that it ain't him. It's his people. So, anyway, they probably have lots of things up their sleeve. Taking over the elections offices, that's one potential. I don't know that that's what they're going to try. It's a potential. Maybe what they'll do is, okay, what things should we try to do to rig the 2026 election? And what things do we want to keep here and not try now so that we could try in 2028 to rig the presidential election? They might be doing that. They don't want to blow their whole load this time. Well, that was a disgusting reference. And they might want to save that for 2028. I don't know. But there's probably lots of things. Obviously, things like using ICE or Border Patrol or the military. I mean, if he's going to invoke the Insurrection Act, that's probably the reason he would do it. Just to get the military on the street. And no, the Insurrection Act is not martial law. All the Insurrection Act is, as bad as it is, and it's fucking horrible, but as bad as it is, and it's horrible largely because it gives the president like nearly unilateral authority to determine whether the circumstances exist to invoke the Insurrection Act. That's one of the main reasons it's so horrible, the vagueness with which the statute is written. But all it does at the end of the day is give the president the ability to call up the military for law enforcement purposes. So if federal law enforcement is not sufficient for whatever task they are assigned, then you can call in the military essentially as backup to law enforcement. But they don't get to come in there and do military things. They get to come in there and do law enforcement things. And they're supposed to follow all the rules of law enforcement. And they're subject to all the rules and procedures and court decisions that guide your local police. Okay, that's the role they're in. Just because they're military doesn't mean they get to behave as they do when you send them to fight foreign wars. Now, that having been said, ICE is supposed to follow all these rules and procedures too, and they don't do it either. They shoot you in the back. They murder you in broad daylight on film. Or, camera. So the reason I would think the main reason he would want to invoke the Insurrection Act is to put military on the street to scare people away from voting. But he can use ICE for that also. So that's certainly one way he's I would imagine he would try to suppress the vote. And again, you don't do that in advance. You don't telegraph that that's what you're going to do. Because then the states can run into court and challenge the deployment. Say this is going to interfere with elections, and they're likely to prevail on that. And so then you'll have you'll have court decisions saying you got to get the hell out of there. That's a bigger problem. So what you do, you just keep that on the down low until election day. And then you flood the city streets with military and with ICE and all of that and scare people away from voting. And you don't have to do it all across the country. Hey, why would you do it in Kansas? Kansas is going to vote red, right? You just do it in Democratic strongholds. Maybe you do it in some red states. You know, maybe you send them to Houston, right? There's deep blue areas of red states. You could send them in there. But you know, Fulton County, you definitely send them into Atlanta, stuff. You don't have to spread them all across the country. Just selected areas, and you can flip the entire state. You concerned about Pennsylvania? Just focus on Philly. That's all you got to do. You don't got to send them all over the place. You just need to find enough votes in one little area. That's what he's up to. Some version of that. And he gave it away, which is why I posted that video this morning on the Romano Report, which I titled, he gave it away, I think is what I titled it. When he said with Dan Bongino that we just need to take over like 15 areas, is what he said. That gave it away. That's the focus. They're going to try to concentrate their rigging efforts in certain select areas. And not entire states. Just certain blue cities. That's their game plan. What exactly are their tactics? I don't know. But I sure as hell hope people are sufficiently alarmed. This is like 5-alarm fire. Okay? This is a break glass moment. The good thing is we know about it now, and we got 10 months almost to prepare for this. If people are sufficiently alarmed and awake. I'm just worried they're not. But I don't know. Anyway, you all got any questions on this topic? I saw a question, where did I wrote it down here. In the comment section before I started, someone said, one thing I've heard today is that he can't do much to... This isn't verbatim, but it was something along these lines. One thing I've heard today is that he can't do too much to influence the midterms because they are controlled by the states, but he can for the presidential election because it's federal. Well, the midterms are federal too. Senate and House, that's federal also. Now, that brings up a good question. What exactly is the authority of the federal government over our elections? Because you're hearing a lot of people now say, well, the feds don't have any control over elections. It's all the states. That's not exactly true. The Constitution gives primary authority over the conducting of our elections to the states. Absolutely true. They're run by the states. But Article 1 does give Congress the authority to regulate time, place, and manner of elections. So they can regulate how federal elections are conducted, but they're still conducted through the states. There's no provision that allows the federal government to take over the administration of elections. Those would still remain in the states, but they can pass laws about how federal elections are conducted. But they haven't. And absent a statute authorizing Trump to do anything, he can't do shit. Not legally, anyway. Now, there is an act pending in Congress right now, the SAVE Act, and a lot of people are freaking out about this. I've got a video that I've already done coming out about this, so I won't get too much into the weeds here. But this is such... Where this act is it's been passed by the House. It's pending in the Senate. And there's a renewed push to get it passed in the Senate. Because Trump is hell-bent on doing something. And Republicans might just cower in fear and pass this. I don't know. They're talking about getting rid of the filibuster rule to pass this, or amending the filibuster rule as it's usually employed just to get this passed, to make it a talking filibuster. Anyway, even if they get this passed, though, I'm not super concerned about this. First of all, the main thrust of this would-be law is to deal with the terrible problem of non-citizens voting in our elections. Now, the reason I rolled my eyes on that is because that's not a it's not a terrible problem. It's not really a problem at all. It doesn't really happen. We don't have a problem with non-citizens voting in our elections. And first of all, it's already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. So that's one thing. But these friggin' MAGAs have convinced themselves that millions, if not tens of millions, of illegal aliens are voting in our elections, which is fucking ludicrous. Can you imagine, especially in this climate, where people, just American citizens who happen to be Hispanic, are afraid to walk down the street for fear of getting the shit beat out of them and whisked off to some prison camp somewhere? You're telling me in this climate that if you're here illegally, you're going to try to register and vote in our elections? It's not going to happen. It never happened before anyway, to any large degree. Sure, maybe an individual case here or there, but it wasn't happening before. It's sure as hell not going to happen now. So this is a solution in search of a problem that doesn't exist. So that's mainly what it's about. But which in and of itself, okay, fine. Non-citizens can't vote in our elections. Whoopie fucking do. Pass that law. It's already law, you dumbasses. What's bad about it is that it puts all these requirements in place in terms of registering to vote. So it says you have to be able to prove your citizenship with documentary evidence. And that would have to be a birth certificate or a passport or something like that. Now, a lot of people don't have either one of those things in their possession. Many people don't have a passport, and many people have long since lost their birth certificate, if they ever had it, don't know where the hell it is. It might be in a box in the attic somewhere, so they functionally don't have one. Now they gotta send away for their birth certificate. That could take weeks. Or they go to get a passport. That could take friggin' months. And apparently, there's a provision in this bill that there'd be a problem if your current name on, say, your driver's license doesn't match the name on your birth certificate, as is the case with many married women, right? They take their husband's name. Their name on their driver's license doesn't match their birth certificate. So guess what? They don't get to vote. I mean, these are the things that people are really freaked out about. I'm not freaked out about it because I don't think any of those provisions would stand. I think they'd get thrown out like that by any court, including the Supreme Court. And I get into this more in the video I referenced, but I'll put it simply. It is long recognized constitutional law that the government cannot impose burdens on exercising core constitutional rights. You can't make it difficult or overly burdensome for people to exercise their constitutional rights. Otherwise, that's a way of denying people their constitutional rights, right? So you can't do that. You can't put into place laws that make it really hard to exercise your rights. You have a right to do certain things. The government can't put all these obstacles in your way in order to exercise them. And voting is a constitutional right, and a pretty important one. So Congress can't, even if Congress does it, they can't pass laws that make it super difficult to vote. And that's what this would do. Can you imagine the clusterfuck that would ensue from this? First of all, almost everyone in this country that's currently registered to vote would immediately become ineligible to vote. Unless, when you registered, you proved your citizenship with a birth certificate or a passport, and those documents are still on file with the clerk or wherever you registered to vote. That's not going to be the case for virtually anyone. So if this passes, immediately we're all like ineligible to vote. You think that's going to stand up in the courts? Fuck no. And then, okay, so then what do you have to do? Now we all have to go and get these documents? We're in an election year right now. The election's coming up. Not too far away. And this thing hasn't even passed the Senate yet. So, and then, if it doesn't pass with the exact same language as the House bill, which it almost certainly would not, then it's got to go to conference, and it's got to go back to the two houses. So we're a long way from this being enacted into law, even if it does. But even then, it's going to get shot down, like I said, just like this. because we're all ineligible to vote immediately. Then we have to go get documents. Now we all have to go get our birth certificates, or we all have to go get our passports. And how many people aren't going to have those things done in time? And how many people won't even freaking know about it? And then they go to vote. They think they're registered to vote because they've been registered like forever. Every year they go and vote. They have no problem because they're registered. And every year they go and they vote and they redo their registration and everything's good. Now all of a sudden this law gets passed. They didn't know anything about it. What percentage of Americans know about laws that get passed through Congress? Virtually nobody. All right, so a lot of people won't even know about this damn law. They're going to show up on election day and they're going to be told, no, sorry, you're not registered anymore. The courts are not going to allow that to stand. They're not going to allow this kind of horrendous burden to be placed on people to exercise their constitutional right to vote. No way this stands. No fucking way. So I'm not all that worried about it. Now, that said, I guess there is a chance that the courts uphold it. So, I certainly would be, I don't want to say alarmed, but concerned if this passes, because then it is up to the courts to do the right thing, and we have been let down before, so it's not a done deal. I don't want to tell you it's absolutely no way it could go into effect. It could, but I just seriously doubt it. I'm not overly worried about that. It might not be. It also might not be struck down in its entirety. Certain provisions could be struck down, and other provisions be allowed to remain in force. That's been challenged as of last week. I don't know what y'all are referring to there. If you're referring to the SAVE Act, it hasn't, because it hasn't passed yet. But anyway, I'm just looking at a conversation that I might just be jumping in the middle of. So anyway, any questions? Do you guys have any questions? Let me scan here real quick. I gotta be wrapping this up. You're in Oregon and love your vote by mail system. Boy, does Trump want to get rid of that, huh? Here's the thing with the vote by mail. What I think is another way Trump wants to rig elections. He wants to constantly rail against voting by mail. And I know some states have all vote by mail. But what he wants to do is rail against vote by mail and convince his voters not to vote by mail. Why? Well, because then if you can get your voters to overwhelmingly not vote by mail, then that the overwhelming percentage of people who cast their votes by mail are going to be Democrats. Now you've identified a component of the vote that is overwhelmingly Democratic. So that is a section of the vote that you want to target for elimination. Now, how do you do that? Well, if you come up with this pretext to go into Fulton County or Philadelphia or whatever, well, maybe you put your goons in there and they just start destroying ballots, mail-in ballots. Hey, because we know that's probably going to be 90% Democratic votes. Just get rid of them. We'll have a little bonfire in the alley. We'll get the shredder going. And I know a lot of places you can check online. You can see the status of your mail. Well, guess what? The goons control it now, so maybe that system just glitches the fuck out. Or maybe they just allow you to think that your vote's been counted, but really it's right in the fucking garbage. Or whatever. So that's why I think he's not going to eliminate vote by mail. And, if he tries to with an executive order, again, it's one of those executive orders like, yeah, this is what I think of your executive order. It's not going to have any effect. But constantly railing against mail-in votes, what they want to do is get their voters to not use them so that they can identify this group of votes as Democratic votes. And then we just got to figure out ways to eliminate those votes. Maybe we do it at the post office. Maybe we put our goons in, the post office's locations in Atlanta. And anytime a vote is mailed and it comes through the post office, that magically goes disappear. I don't know. I'm just, thinking out loud here. But once you identify a group of votes as overwhelmingly likely, overwhelmingly Democratic votes, now you know a group of votes that you want to get rid of in some fashion. That's what I think he's up to there. Okay. Yeah, I got to wrap it up. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to cover. I don't think there's anything that's all that pressing that I can't wait till later. Anyway, that's it for now. Oh, let me see. I'm a citizen living in Nova Scotia. I mailed in my votes before. I wonder if I will still be able to do that. I don't know, Sheila. I don't know. I don't want to tell you things that I don't know are true or not. I'd be suspicious. Sure as hell would be suspicious. I'd be worried about my vote getting lost or not counted. Yeah, I don't trust any of these people. I think the safest way to vote, if there is going to be a safe way in some of these places, if you can do it, is to vote early in person. I've said this before. I think that's the best way. If you can't do that, you got to do what you got to do. So I would never say, hey, don't you dare vote by mail. If that's what, there's lots of people who have to vote by mail for a variety of reasons. You do what you got to do, but just be as careful as possible, because when you vote by mail, there's oftentimes lots of steps you got to follow. You got to sign this over here. You got to do this on the seal of the envelope over here. You got to put your driver's license. You got to do you got to go through a lot of hoops. And if any one of those things is wrong, that's a reason to throw your ballot in the garbage. So just be careful. And then on election day, why is that not a safe alternative? Well, anything could go wrong. You could have something in your personal life go wrong that prevents you from voting that day for whatever reason. Or, you might have to deal with ICE thugs or the military. That kind of thing. Easier to vote in advance in person if you can. That's just my thoughts. Everybody's got to make their own decisions. I'm just trying to put out things that I'm concerned about. And the truth is, nobody knows. Nobody knows for sure what the hell this guy's going to do. Nobody knows. And if anyone tells you for sure that they know, they're full of shit. But we all have to be thinking about all this stuff. We've got to conjure in our mind all the different ways that they might do this. And every time I talk about this stuff, I invariably get people who say, Romano, don't give them ideas. Shut your mouth. You're going to give them ideas. We have to openly speculate about this stuff. That's number one. But number two, they got whole teams of people thinking up this shit. And number three, they're not listening to me anyway. Okay, so that's not really a concern. But I'm telling you, look, you don't think the Project 2025 guys have been thinking about this like years ago? They've been thinking about this shit for years. We're trying to play catch up. I mean, a lot of this stuff they've probably already thought about. They've probably already drawn up plans for exactly how to execute it. We're trying to figure out what some of those plans might be to try to figure out how to combat them. So, anyway, we need to talk about this a lot more, and I really hope people can't take this one lying down. And again, I don't know if he's going to pull out all the stops for the midterms. Maybe he'll try a little bit. He'll try some of this, but not all of it, because the big one is 2028. Absolutely, that's the big one. Like Epstein, right? I think right now he's most concerned about rigging the midterms because of Epstein. He doesn't want investigations into Epstein. He certainly doesn't want impeachments, and that's why as long as he can flip the Senate or hold the Senate, flip seats that he might have lost, like Georgia, that's a prime target right there. If he can go into Fulton County and make sure that the Republican wins the state of Georgia, if they can hold on to the Senate, then he will think, hey, then even if they impeach me in the House, they're never going to remove me in the Senate. I don't know that is a safe bet. I think it's certainly more likely that he'll be safe in that situation, but I don't think it's a definite that he won't be removed from office, depending how bad things get. Well, we'll see. So even if he loses the House and he's worried about Epstein hearings, what can happen? He's not going to be prosecuted I mean, he could I mean, if he did shit, and we have proof of it, he could be prosecuted because depending upon where it happened and what exactly happened, because a lot of places, a lot of things that could be done as crimes to minors don't have statutes of limitation that apply to some of these crimes. So it is possible he could be prosecuted, but he's not going to be prosecuted in office. Now, the Supreme Court has never ruled on that specific case. Can a sitting president be prosecuted? That's never come up. But based on, two Office of Legal Counsel positions that have been written on this subject, once during the Nixon administration and once during the Clinton administration, both times they reached the conclusion that a sitting president cannot be indicted while he's in office. You got to wait till he leaves office. And I'm sure that that's what this Supreme Court would say. So he knows that as long as he's president, he's safe. But the second he's out, he's not. So even with the Epstein stuff, it might be horribly damaging to him, but he's not in any danger of being prosecuted for those crimes as long as he's president, which is why he wants to either somehow stay in office. He's not going to be on the ballot, but maybe... I hope, and by the way, you've heard me say this before, I hope that's what he does. Oh my God, do I hope. My ideal situation, if this piece of shit makes it to the end of his term, which I don't think he will. I think there's any number of reasons he doesn't make it, and I don't think he will. But if he does, what I hope, I hope that a Democrat wins the presidency in 2028 and that Trump refuses to leave. That is my dream scenario. Like, my real dream scenario is that Congress at some point does the right thing and impeaches and removes him from office, because that is what he deserves under our Constitution. That's what should happen. That's the right thing, is that he gets impeached and removed and then prosecuted for his many crimes. But if he doesn't and he makes it to the end of his term, my dream is that he refuses to leave. Oh, that would be I think that would be the best outcome for the country in the long term. Let the American people see this guy dig himself into his bunker under his friggin' ballroom and just refuse to leave. Maybe he gets some loyalists in the military to try to defend the bunker. I don't know how but he's sick in the head. I mean, it's not going to work, but in his fucking diseased mind, he might think it's going to work. But that's what I hope happens. I want him to go down in flames like that. Let's drag his orange ass out of his bunker and then prosecute him. I want him to do something like that, because that's the exclamation point we need at the end of this presidency. I don't want him, if he makes it to the end, I don't want him to make it to the end and then just go to Mar-a-Lago and play golf. And, he is a MAGA hero until his death, and then he is, a historical hero to MAGA. No. I want him to do something so fucking batshit crazy and awful that all future generations of Americans know that this son of a bitch was fucking batshit crazy and a criminal and an insurrectionist and a traitor to the country. And it may take something like Trump trying to overturn the election, refusing to leave, something like that. So that is what I hope happens if something doesn't happen before that to remove him from office. Okay, that's it, guys. I appreciate you sticking with me for this hour, but we'll do it again real soon. And thanks for joining me. I'll see you soon.